Hello, everybody. Welcome back. I'm very excited to have my next guest on the show. I have the honor of working with this individual at FHE. He's Dr. Beau Nelson. He's the Chief Clinical Officer at FHE Health, and he is a tremendous asset to the company, and he's helping patients get better one patient at a time. Right, doctor?
That's right. That's been doing this for 22 years, working with substance use and mental health. And it's a passion of mine, and it's a privilege to be able to step in and help people to feel better and to live their best lives.
It's amazing. I mean, I never thought, as you know, I was a patient there, doctor, at Shatterproof, and I never thought that I was going to be working for this amazing organization, because like you, I'm very passionate about what I do, and that's helping our brave men and women who serve, as well as anybody else. Now, what drove you? What was the catalyst that got you into the business besides schooling and things like that? Was there something when you were young that you wanted to do this, or what was the catalyst?
No, it's an interesting road. You know, spirituality is an important part of my life, and I actually had gotten into ministry and was in seminary, enjoyed pastoral counseling, and I decided that my calling wasn't in the church. And through a series of steps, I found myself in working as a clinical social worker, and started off in private psychiatric hospitals. And it's just been a wonderful journey ever since then. And 20 years of training and 22 years in practice, and just been a wonderful opportunity. And really, I just have really enjoyed helping folks and being able to learn and grow. And, you know, as any, I think, a decent clinician will tell you, they learn more from their patients sometimes than the patients learn from us.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting, and that's a great point. Now, the treatment that FHE, and I don't want to make it totally about Shatterproof and FHE, but what differentiates FHE Health from other treatment facilities? There's plenty of options out there, doctor. You know that. There's plenty of treatment facilities. But one of the things that really impressed me with the program was the different treatment of it, you know, options that a patient has. Can you talk about that for a few minutes?
Right. Well, you know, a treatment is a multifaceted experience. And so you're really trying to look at the whole person. And so at FHE, because we're a larger organization, but we then create individualized treatment experiences. So one is the Shatterproof program, but we also have a completely dedicated mental health program. And then we have dedicated programs for men and women and substance use programs. And so it's really like 4 or 5 tiny little treatment centers within one big one. And so this is all based really on a model. I'm actually a doctor of behavioral health. And so I was trained to work in primary care medicine with psychological and behavioral interventions for long-term disease management and a variety of different health conditions. And so we really use this integrated behavioral health model, which is not siloing and treating, you know, this is your medical, so that's completely separate. And here's your family issues, and that's completely separate. And here's the medication, and that's separate. What we do is we bring it all together. And so what you'll find at FHE is that we're able to really bring in a lot of different disciplines, partly that engages people in treatment, and partly it actually gives everyone an understanding of what healthy living is about. So when they come in, they meet with a physical medicine provider. So then that will actually take care of their physical health, because for a lot of folks, when they're in the midst of addiction or mental health issues, their bodies are impacted by that.
Yeah,
so you got to treat the medical. So that we have providers 7 days a week, and we're able to treat their medical conditions, some, you know, brittle diabetics, some end stage liver disease, whereas a lot of facilities might just have, you know, a doctor is able to come in on Tuesdays and do an evaluation. Everybody goes out to hospital, but we're actually able to maintain that, get them stabilized physically as well as psychiatrically by a psychiatrist, also clinically, also emotionally, you know, their diet, their, you know, all these different components. And so that's really an important part of treating the whole person.
Yeah. Yeah. And the one thing that, I mean, I had so many takeaways. And when I talk to people, about seeking help and taking that first step forward, I like to talk about neurostimulation. And I think if you could take a
Right.
few moments and talk about
Sure.
neurofeedback, neurostimulation, because I saw
Yeah.
you a couple of weeks ago and I was like, and you dumbed it down for people like me,
I try to make it practical.
you make it practical, but you're
Yeah.
much more, educated and smarter than I am when it comes to this stuff. Can you just talk about that? Because that was just amazing, doctor. And I got to tell you, and I think we talked about this before, when I got there, they started talking about neurostimulation, and I was like, what, one flew over the cuckoo's nest, Jack Nicholson,
Right.
electric shock therapy, but
Right.
it's not that. And I think some people get confused with that because it's not that. It's
No,
something.
I actually used to work in the Department of Psychiatry at a medical center, a university medical center, and we did 2,000 cases of electroconvulsive therapy each year.
Yeah.
And it gets a bad rap, but this is nothing like that. And so a lot of people do get confused. There's lots of different kind of treatments that are out there now, and a lot of people, really don't know how to make sense of it, or is this going to be helpful for me, or is this useful? So, just to give a little background, in 2016, the Society for Addiction Medicine actually determined that substance use is a brain disorder. Now that's significant because for many years we thought it was a character issue. It's a spiritual issue. This is you're a weak person. All of these different things, really basically blaming the person who is simply struggling to live within their own body.
Just get rid of it. Don't think about it.
Right. Yeah. And but again, it was just like it's a moral failing.
Sure.
And so, unfortunately, science it doesn't catch up to the point. So now we're, understanding the brain and understanding how the body works with the brain, and all this stuff has been really significant. And so we at FHE, once that was determined, said, how can we best help people in what is really a pretty short window of time in treatment? People drink or use for, 20 years,
Sure.
And then they come into treatment and they're there for 45, 60 days. And so it's, obviously you can't treat everything, but you want to give people the best chance. And neurotherapy, which has been around for 30 years, it's FDA approved, it's non-invasive, does not require drugs. And the great thing about it is the patient can have absolutely no interest in being sober, and they'll still get benefit from the treatment.
Yeah.
And so, but we use a variety of different things. And so a big thing in behavioral health care, which is substance use and mental health, is the idea of what we call evidence-based treatment. And so a lot of treatment in psychology is kind of like, it's very subjective. You go to 10 psychiatrists, you get 10 different
opinions or diagnoses. Yeah.
Right. And so it can take many years, even decades, for people to find effective treatment. And so the idea for us is saying, well, we have a strong clinical program with master's and PhD level clinicians. We've got a strong group program. We've got all the different bells and whistles that go with that. But the fact of the matter is that, we just see a very unfortunate relapse rate that happens with folks in substance use, let's say. And so, but the interesting thing is that the relapse rate for substance abuse is exactly the same as diabetes.
Yeah.
About 40 to 60%. So the fact is, substance use is far more complicated because it does hijack the brain. But the fact is that human beings in general, I mean, how many times have you said, I'm going to start exercising and working out? And then by, that's January 1st. And then by March 3rd, you've already fallen off the wagon.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
So human beings aren't necessarily really good with that consistency. And so we want to actually work at the level where we're going to see the most effective change for a person.
Yeah.
And neurotherapy provides that.
It's amazing. Because they map the brain, they do a before and after, as you know, doctor. And I remember, I didn't really start feeling any difference until about my fourth or fifth session. And then for me, I know everybody's different, but for me, it was like a light switch coupled with the other therapy I was doing, the breath work, the yoga, all those different, holistic kind of things that we do down there, great things. But then I was hooked on neurostimulation. And when I was done, I think I did about 18 sessions. I think the average is about 15, right?
15 shows the full efficacy for the treatment.
Yeah. And if you relapse, like you were talking about, you can lose that gain that you gained through neurostimulation, correct?
Yes. Yeah. Anytime you have a disturbance to the ecosystem of the body, you're going to have an effect. And
Yeah.
so if you have a concussive injury, if you have toxic substances in your system, if you have some kind of new traumatic event, the brain has to respond and adjust to that. And so unfortunately, you can't just, it's not like one and done. It's kind of like, I worked out for 6 months, so my body's always going to be perfect. No, it's not.
Where do you see the future going with this type of therapy? And maybe that's too much of a broad question, but I ask you anyway. I mean, do you think we're going to, because we only know, we still know very little about the brain, and it all starts with the brain, right? I mean, where do you think the future is going with this?
Well, there's a lot of interconnectedness to it. And so the fact is that, speaking of like electroconvulsive therapy, we don't know why it works, but it's the most effective treatment for depression, treatment-resistant depression. And again, we are unraveling the body and the mind. We now know that a big part of how the mind works goes through your gut.
Yeah.
And so a lot of studies are really showing us that, enzymes in the gut and vitamins and things
second
like
brain.
Yeah, right. And so, again, the idea with it is that you really have to have a very high level understanding of what the brain is and how you treat that. And so again, we're trying to give people the best chance at success. And so again, this isn't just for someone with a substance use disorder or a mental health disorder. Sports stars are using this, executives are doing it for peak performance, really to get their brain at kind of its optimum functioning. And a lot of us don't realize that, even if you're not diagnosed with a mental health condition, the fact of the matter is that the effects of chronic stress or other kinds of chronic situations, where you're just, really kind of just slowly, death by 1,000 cuts, slowly your body and your mind just isn't working at its peak. And so the idea, what we're able to do is to create and to really give people an opportunity both to understand how their brain works and to show them a research-based, evidence-based, science-based treatment. So we begin the process with a quantitative electroencephalogram, and that basically just tells you how the electrical impulses in the brain are functioning. And so there are different kinds of wavelengths, and all of those really correspond with different symptoms that people have. So a person can come in and get a QEEG, and you can look at it without ever talking to the patient, and you can tell them what their symptoms are.
Yeah, it's amazing. I remember my mother suffered from depression for years, and it's amazing how far we've come in treatment with depression and other things. And I remember I was talking to a friend of mine about different treatment options, and I remember being a police officer for many years, on the topic of ketamine. Now ketamine is being used in some instances to treat depression, correct?
Yes, it is. It's shown great efficacy, and even now, a lot of folks you might be seeing on, in the news, looking at psychedelics that are being used to, at this point, investigationally to treat trauma and responses. And so, again, the understanding of the brain is really growing. But what we're using is really a science-backed method, which is faster than, like, a lot of people might use TMS, but that requires a lot more sessions, and it's more of a broad stroke, whereas we use pulse electromagnetics, which are very focused. And so we can be able to see where the brain is dysregulated from the QEEG, and then be able to target specific areas with research proven neuro techniques. One is traditional neurotherapy and using the magnetics to be able to re-regulate the brain, and then the neurostimulation, which is a different treatment, and then that's really used, that actually hydrates the brain with blood. And in doing that, it actually gives the basic building blocks for new nerve endings in the brain so the brain can communicate better. And then also at the same time, it mimics a lot of folks in the trauma world know about EMDR, which is a very effective treatment working with folks with trauma, but we're actually able to do it at the brain level. So we don't use the eye movement or the clickers that people might be familiar with. We can actually do it, and the patient goes into a natural state of what's called neuroplasticity. And so it basically takes down the walls. You're able to talk and really be open to an opportunity to talk about what's going on. And the most important part of that is that you're in a complete learning mode. So I always contrast it. I always tell people, it's kind of like if you have a file cabinet. And so, pull out the file cabinet and all the files fall on the floor. So that's basically what most people do every day. They're searching on the floor for files, and you'll have, just little symptoms. Have you ever walked into a room and forgotten why you walked in there?
Absolutely.
Do you ever have a time when your memory's off, or you go in the kitchen and you go, again, I'm not even sure what I'm hungry for. Or, where's my keys? All those little things, and again, they're not necessarily life impairing, but again, it's just your mind is not at its best. And so when you go through this process and you're especially with the neurostimulation, what it does is it basically takes all the files, puts them in the file cabinet, orders them, and closes the drawer. So your brain is now more efficient, and it's able to actually track and to do things. And so you're at your best or optimal functioning.
Yeah, amazing. And I tell people, doctor, and you correct me if I'm wrong, is that, Shatterproof and FHE, because I know there's other programs within FHE, but my program, the one I went through, Shatterproof, it gave me the foundation to move forward. I tell people that it's up to the patient once they get released or discharged to continue with the tools and continue with the therapy. And some people don't, then they relapse, like you said. Because I think some people, you correct me if I'm wrong again, they think they go to treatment and it's a one and done and they're cured. No, it's a continual process, right?
Right, of course, yes. Any process of ongoing benefit to you, kind of like lifelong learning. Oh, I graduated college, so I'm never learning anything again. Well, you probably aren't going to be the best in your career or the best in your marriage or best with a parent if that's you just think you've got everything. And so obviously the process of recovery, whether it's mental health or substance use, is a process. And what we do is that we're just kind of resetting for folks and giving them an opportunity, which for first responders is particularly tough, because when you're the person who's taking care of everybody else, you're the helper. It feels really strange to be receiving help.
Yeah. Exactly. Speaking of that, you work a lot with first responders. You're all over the place helping the, our brave personnel that serve and protect. I mean, there's so many things that first responders are trying to grapple with now. What are some of the more reoccurring themes? And maybe that's too broad, but again, what are some of the reoccurring things that they're suffering with now? Because I can't imagine, doctor. I mean, I retired in 2019, and it was tough then. I think it's just compounded now with all that is happening in the world now. But I do think first responders still have a lot of support. But what are they grappling with? What are you hearing?
Well, I do hear a lot of people sharing, they go into this work to try to make a difference, to try to help their communities, and to be disliked or not trusted or disrespected, or to feel like you're the enemy of the people. Has really taken a big toll on a lot of first responders. I mean, and again, it's not just, those that carry a gun. I mean, look at, people are, beating up nurses.
Oh, yeah. Firefighter, all the frontline personnel, nurses, doctors, the whole gambit.
Yeah, it's kind of this chaos that's going on. And again, for first responders tend to be somewhat ordered, follow the rules, put, chain of command, all of these things in a world that is just kind of basically falling apart. So that's an issue. Another one is that so much of police work has turned into really kind of like a quasi mental health counseling, because so many folks that police police are called out to deal with situations are really suffering from something that they've not been able to be trained for. And so we ask, why is there excessive violence, or why are, people, they're not able to talk to this person or whatever. Just a lot of folks don't get that kind of training in police work, let's say, or even in fire work. So you're kind of coming up against something that you don't really know, and then people are beating you up because you're not doing it right.
Yeah, exactly. And I tell people, getting into law enforcement, first of all, thank you for all the listeners out there that are serving and protecting.
Right.
But I never thought that we would be going to and responding to, and that's part of our job. I mean, when I first started, Doctor, I mean, we had just, a handful of people in mental crisis calls. Now it's every day. I talk to officers from all over the place. They're responding to this. And I guess my point is, there's only so much that you can see as a first responder, trauma and suffering, before it starts manifesting internally with other things, right?
Of course, yes. I mean, again, we all have a breaking point.
Yeah.
And again, a big part of that is self-care and making yourself, stress hardy and being able to process and kind of get past something. But again, in our first responder cultures, some departments don't really have resources. Again, the officers, firefighters, whoever, are not really trained in what this looks like. And again, usually we take that external trauma and stress and then we turn it inwards. And that's where you find people just try to figure a way to get through the day. And so, you'll see all the memes on, the internet, about, the wine moms, and it's like, oh, I'm stressed out, and they've got the giant glass of wine, and this is my favorite time of the day.
Probably not a
But
good.
just to think about someone dealing with death, dismemberment, traumatic experiences, angry people, violent situations. And again, it's like a glass of wine doesn't take care of that.
One of the things that is very difficult being a first responder, and you probably hear and see it all the time, Doctor, is the inability to come forward. And for me, it was ego or hubris, whatever you want to call it. Fear, obviously. Why is it so hard, in your opinion, for first responders to come forward when we have more help than ever now out there? I mean, I think it's probably maybe a trust issue, or what?
Well, obviously it's individualized to the person, but again, you've got to think about the ideas when you're taught to be the savior.
Yeah.
You lose that when you admit your weakness, and so it's very tough, and it doesn't feel safe for a lot of folks. A lot of first responders really pride themselves on being, emotionally secure and handle a situation and good in a crisis and all that. And if you start, telling everybody, oh, I cry myself to sleep every night or whatever, everyone's going to go, and it's going to diminish that sense of self related to what you want to do. And so when your real self and your ideal self don't match, you've got to put something in between there. And unfortunately, it's bad behaviors or drugs and alcohol a lot of times.
The one thing that I learned in treatment that FHE and Shatterproof taught me is that I had to be very selfish with my self-care, not narcissism or anything like that, but I have to take, and I know we hear it all the time, you got to take care of yourself first, but it really came to fruition when I was in treatment, where again, not discounting family and friends and loved ones, but I had to be selfish with my self-care. And I think that's the problem. A lot of people aren't. It's definitely the first responder community. They put everybody else first instead of putting them first. But we have this one shot, that, I mean, at life. And, and the reality is, I don't think we're here for very long. So you have to take care of yourself.
Right. Well, it is. And again, this is a much larger issue than the whole just first responders. The idea
the population as a whole.
Right. Yeah. We're just seeing this all the time. And the kind of the psychological part of this that some people don't often see is that it's far easier to solve other people's problems than it is to solve your own.
Because you're focused on inward. If you, I'd rather give you advice, Dr. Nelson, than to focus on myself. And it's amazing to me, people like that in my world, or used to be in my world, their lives are a mess, but they're giving me advice.
That's one of my favorite catchphrases with my patients is I would say two things. I say, do the opposite of what you normally do. And you're such a great advice giver. Take your own advice and follow that.
I love it.
Right. Yeah.
So what advice would you give somebody out there that is, having that trepidation, having that fear, of taking that step forward? I think I saw a stat, the stats well, 40%, talking about first responders, 40% of first responders are out there suffering from mental health issues or addiction or both. And I think that's just probably not the accurate number. It's kind of like the dark figure of crime.
Underreported.
It's underreported. I think that number's much higher. So what advice would you give somebody out there listening that is really struggling? First of all, if you're struggling, reach out right now and, call emergency services, but somebody who's teetering on whether or not to go to treatment or not.
Right. Well, I think a big part of it is to stop for a moment and really assess what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
The fact of the matter is that if your life isn't working, then you're going to know that. But if you stay real busy, you might not notice it. It's kind of like gradually, then suddenly. It's like, it's so funny how people like, I put on 25 pounds, they step on the scale. Well, yeah, but you had to put on 1 pound before you put on 25, but you just didn't notice it.
Yeah.
And so part of it is really being kind of aware and just saying, I'm not really happy. I'm not doing what I really believe is part of my values. I'm not really there for the people I need, who need me, or the people that I want to help. And so you just have to really kind of have a moment of reflection. But the idea with it, and I always tell people this, I said, I may be full of crap and what I tell you isn't going to work. I said, you can always go back to what you are doing.
Yeah. Which is probably not working.
Right. But again, yeah, it's like, but people are scared because unfortunately the way the mind works is that what we do is we have a problem and we find something. And if that something works, then we just do more of it.
Yeah.
Even if at some point it stops working, we're more comfortable holding on to something than we are to let it go.
And it's creatures of habit, right? I mean, change is uncomfortable. It's foreign. We don't like doing that.
Right.
And
you got to let something go. You got to, especially when you talk about substance use, or that's one thing, is that the substance becomes your whole life. Everything revolves around it. And so for someone to then say, hey, take that away, it's so scary, not to mention the physical and mental effects of what that has done to you. But it's just by nature. It's kind of like, if I told you, here's the love of your life and they're wonderful, well, they're going to be gone tomorrow. Well, of course you're going to fall apart.
Yeah.
But that's really what happens in substance use, is that it's like, this worked, I'm just going to keep doing it, but it doesn't work now. That doesn't matter. I don't know. I'm just going to keep doing this. And so the idea with it is that, you came up with this and you did the best you could. We honor you, hey, this happens. Again, we take away the stigma. You're not the only person. This is going on. But at the same time, there are other things that you can do. There is a chance for you. Yeah. And again, hearing somebody's story, just like the great things you're doing on the podcast here, by talking about it and being out there, you go, all these people are telling me how great it is not to keep doing what I'm doing. Can they all be wrong?
Yeah.
Do I really want to hang out at a bar or be, calling out for my shift because didn't sleep at all last night because I was too high? Is that really how I want to lead my life? And the idea is, and again, it doesn't have to be a psychiatrist, it doesn't have to be a therapist. Talk to somebody.
Yeah.
Talk to somebody who really cares about you.
A trusted somebody.
Right. And just say what's going on. One of our biggest problems in our first responder community is our rate of suicide.
Yeah.
And I work with so many different departments, and I talk with so many people, their family and other officers after an event has happened. And everybody is like, we were all there for him or her, or we were, we wanted to help and we had all these things and we reached out, and they just kept turning us away. And so again, sometimes, the interventions are obviously more severe, but we've got to remember in our culture is that a lot of times when these things are found out, just like for the general population, they get arrested and they go, oh, I got a problem with my drinking. My fourth DUI. Mm-hmm. The same thing for officers happens a lot, or for firefighters, is they get caught using through the job, and then it becomes a discipline issue.
Yeah.
And so again, the idea is you're going to get a lot more bang for your buck if you recognize a problem and you start to do something about it. So call it self-preservation or, whatever, minimize your losses, is that, generally this isn't, consequences change people's behavior.
Yeah.
And so if you can't take a moment to recognize the consequences, then you'll probably continue to believe that this is the only thing you can do. But just talk to somebody, somebody you can trust, somebody who you care about. The idea is that, again, things aren't working, but it's just sometimes scary. And you sometimes need to have that, we have a lot, just like Patrick, what you're doing for us here at FHE, this is really an important thing. We build relationships in departments. We build relationships in communities. We build relationships with leaders in the different departments and cities around the country. And a part of what that is because they need to be able to trust us.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the officers or the firefighters or the EMTs or the corrections officers, they have to be able to trust someone. And it's generally not the EAP, unfortunately, or it's not the discipline process. But there are resources out there, and you can call a hotline, you can call FHE, you can call, whatever it is, and ask for help.
Yeah.
And, again, it's one of those things. If it doesn't get better, it doesn't get better. But I always think in life, it's not the successes or the failures in life that really we look back on and say, okay, that's what makes me. It's the biggest regrets are what we actually never tried.
Absolutely. There's a great book out there called the 5 Regrets of Dying by an author called Bronnie Ware. And she was it just made me think about that when you said that, the regrets. And it's a great book. And she was a hospice nurse, and she went and interviewed all these elderly patients who became close with them. And she talked about that. And you hit one of the bullet points is regretting not taking a step or taking a chance. I mean, there's more to the book than that. But the one thing I tell first responders to Dr. Nelson is, you are unique. You're a unique individual. There's not anybody else in the world like you, but your problems, in my opinion, are not unique. Oh, I have an alcohol problem. Okay. I have an addiction problem. Okay. I'm depressed. I have suicidal ideation. Okay. Millions of other people have had the same things. Yeah, it's different. It's what you're going through, but they've gone through the same stuff and they've sought treatment and now they're better. Right. So people have this idea. I know I did. Oh, nobody understands my problems. My problems are, they're just so extraordinary. No, they're not. And I'm not trying to minimize. I'm not trying to mitigate what people are going through. I'm just saying my point is that this is what FHE Health does. Been doing it for a long time. Experts like you. So that you are trained and the whole point is to, like you said, take that step forward because, the challenges are always going to come, but your challenges aren't unique.
And that's why we created the Shatterproof Program, is because the needs of first responders. So it's police, fire, EMS, corrections, military folks. It is different. But again, the idea is that I always tell people, they say, well, I can't talk to anyone about my issues because you won't understand. I said, well, does your doctor really understand being a police officer?
Yeah.
Does your gynecologist understand being a police officer? Again, does your pharmacist understand being a police officer? No, there's a lot of services you get that they don't have to completely understand you. But what we learned, and that's why we've really invested in this program, is to be able to give people a safe space as first responders to be able to talk about it. And I have so many folks that come in and they'll sit there and go, well, I can't talk about this. No one's going to understand. And they come in and you may remember, and it's like, I witnessed this traumatic death when I was on duty. And I know you all won't understand. And the 6 people raise their hand and go, same thing.
Yeah.
Same thing. Yeah. And you're not special.
Yeah. And the one thing that, it was like when I got there, it's like, it's not a contest to see who has the most dramatic. Well, I can top that. I saw, a triple fatality. It's not about that, because what the individual is dealing with is big enough for them to be suffering. It's not about upping each other with traumatic stories. We don't want to do that.
It is. And the idea is, everyone's at a different space, and some people are open to the idea of making their life better. Some people are too scared. Some people have some other, limits. Our mind has what we call psychological defense mechanisms that'll often prevent us from doing the good that we know we can do. We just have to be at the right place at the right time. We need to ask the right people. We need to try to find the help that we have. But when people complete our programs, it's not because, it's like, well, this is, you're cured. The idea with it is, and it's not you're just jumping through hoops. Yes, I signed this form. Oh, I filled this out. I did this. Okay, now I'm going to go back to work and just life starts again. No, it's that we've done everything we can possibly do for you, and using the evidence-based treatments, using that whole person concept, really giving them the opportunity, giving them the resources to continue after when they leave, really helping folks to be in a different space. And I'll tell you, it's, again, it's really an opportunity. And I have seen so many people, Shatterproof Program and others, who come in, and I was like, boy, I hope we can be able to help. And they turn into the biggest proponents. I mean, I've got officers who, it was a struggle, but they've sent 3 of their friends from their department to treatment just on their own personal recommendation.
Yeah. And it's people like you there. It's the team.
Yes.
It's Dr. Nelson. It's Dr. Sashi. All these people. That's what's so amazing about the program. Yes. It's the treatment, but it's the people that are generally want to help people, not just first responders, but the other programs at FHE Health. And I think that's what makes it a game changer
it's a huge part of it, being obviously an ethically based organization. We're long-term. We've been doing this a long time. We've built relationships based on the results that we have. We track the outcomes. We really provide the services, and we meet all the accreditation standards, all of those things.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's really about personal connections. And that's again, in the Shatterproof program, it's easier for a cop to connect to a cop than it would be to connect with a banker. So we understand that, and we give them an opportunity to be able to make the benefit of that. And a specialized program doesn't mean that we're going to, some kind of magic, happens in this room, but it's not in the room next door. No, at the core, we're still just people, but we're at the same time, we're meeting where you are and what's going on for you. And so for first responders, that means talking their language, understanding their culture. We have a separate team of therapists and staff, as you know, that only work with first responders, that we've created this. So it's not, first responders aren't in a group with just a substance use or patient or a mental health. They're all completely separate. They have their community, they share rooms with, they're able to do that. And so is that necessary? Well, psychologists probably debate whether it is, but does it make a difference in treatment? Hell yes, it does.
Absolutely. And I can attest to that.
Right.
I can attest to that. And like you said, the Shatterproof personnel, men, women from all walks of life, are together. And I tell you what, Dr. Nelson, some of the most interesting and best treatment was just sitting around the table in the courtyard right there and just talking and just, free flow conversation. And everybody's walls are down. Everybody's just opening up. And it was truly
right. And that's part of the therapeutic experience. Some folks will come in and they say, well, I need to be in group or individual or whatever, I'm all day long. Why aren't I doing something? And it's like, this is part of the problem of addiction and mental health issues, is that you're wanting to be so busy and, I'm going to absorb all this stuff. You can see a therapist, 8 hours a day for 5 days a week. You're not necessarily going to get better than you would if you saw them once or twice. It's what you do between the sessions. It's not just the visit to your doctor. It's not just this. And part of that is learning how to quiet your mind, learn how to be in a community and open up and develop healthier relationships and be able to deal with downtime, be able to understand and process what's going on in your life, not just jumping from fire to fire to fire. And all of these different things are all in a well-equipped treatment program. It's all used together. And I will tell you, and again, I feel like I'm the wizard behind the curtain.
You are.
Yeah, I guess so, probably. The idea is that this is all constructed to be a immersive experience. And so you're not just getting treatment when you're in group or when you're meeting with your individual therapist, or when you're meeting with the doctor, you're getting treatment because this is a complete therapeutic environment that helps to change people. And it does it in a way that sometimes they don't even recognize it.
Yeah. And the treatment is only as good as the patient is willing to put into it, right?
Well,
and you got to put in the work. You got to
yeah,
put in the work. It's
it is.
nothing's going to fall in your lap.
All right. Well, the neuro is good because you don't really have to even want to get better.
Oh, no,
but
you
the
just
fact
sit
of
there.
the matter is it will change the way your brain is processing, just like new experiences, just like, somebody opening up about the trauma they never wanted to talk about. All of a sudden, I have never had an opportunity to really be with somebody who said, oh, talking about my trauma has made it worse.
Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes it's worse for a little bit, but not permanently.
Yeah.
You're
amazing, Dr. Nelson.
Thank you,
Dr. Beau Nelson, Chief Clinical Officer, FHE Health. I know I'm going to put show notes on the podcast, Dr. Nelson, but if people wanted to reach out to you socially, I mean, I know where to find you. I'll put FHE Health information. If people want to reach out to you socially, is there a way they can contact you?
No, I don't really do much. This is about as technologically advanced. I'm one of the few people who's not anywhere on anything. But the good thing is that we are FHE keeps track of me, and I have some wonderful people.
They keep track of you. What do you mean?
They do, yes,
exactly. You or something, Dr. Nelson?
Not a conspiracy theory, but they actually they're so much better at all this. So we're on Twitter and Facebook and all that, and they share information about all the things that I'm doing, the great people I'm working with around the country, and so please feel free to follow me on any of that. That's usually the best way to keep track of me.
Dr. Nelson, thank you so much, sir. It's a pleasure to have you on the show, and I'm gonna get to see you.
Great.
Next week, hopefully. So,
well, thank you, Patrick, and thank you for all you do and for the podcast, and just to leave everybody, remember that there's always hope. That's really what I do. That's my job, is to give people hope that no matter how dark it seems right now, no matter what you've gone through or done in your life, is that there is forgiveness, there's redemption, there is recovery. And so just never give up until you find what you need.
Absolutely. Amen, my friend.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Nelson.
Patrick.
Thank you, sir.